also means that managing these assets that we will create for you, that some of our tools might create for you, doesn't require any extra knowledge. Using Metahuman doesn't bring any unnecessary dependencies into your project and build. So, we're finally getting to those partitions. What assets do we provide, and what can Metahuman help you with? We'll start with the easy things. You can choose from different body types, grooms, and a collection of clothing. These are grouped together because all of these are discrete, handcrafted assets, and they are available from Metahuman Creator. They're discrete choices, or at least they're discrete choices for now. And at export time, the correct variants that you've picked are exported as assets. Any necessary work, like groom binding, linking the colliders, all of that is done for you. And all of these come with fine-grained LOD choices. There are currently 18 body types in Metahuman Creator, and like most, we separate heads and bodies. So we've also taken care of seaming, LOD syncing, and all of that. Now, Metahuman bodies were made mannequin compatible some time ago. They weren't at the very, very first time of release, but they are now, which gives you access to a whole host of animation from our samples as well as from third parties. Now, quick tip, if you wish to use Metahuman only for the heads, which is fairly common, you will have to take care of seaming yourself. We strongly recommend that you pick a body type. Don't ignore this choice. Pick a body type that is close to what you think you will need, because that will actually save you quite a bit of time when it comes to seaming. For clothing, there is a curated selection of handcrafted items. We have tops and trousers and shoes. These are contemporary designs, so if you're doing a period or a sci-fi piece, the look might not work for you. I will still suggest you don't completely sleep on these. At a minimum, they can be a very good starting point for you to get skinning and LODing templates transferred to your cuts. We also make sure that all of these fit all of our body types. And because Metahuman has become pretty popular as an asset platform, you can find a lot more from third parties. If you get something from a third party, to remember to check what body types they support, because it might not be all 18. Now, Metahumans also come with several grooms, and that goes from the subtle pitch fuzz on skin to full hairdos. If there is one you like, great. If not, they're actually very good sample content, to be perfectly honest. It's definitely worth getting at least a few, inspect them, look at how the groom binding works, look at how the LOD sync work, because that is functionality that if you bring your own grooms into it, you almost certainly will want to support. And it's also worth noting, not all, but most of these grooms also have been carded across all LODs, so they're pretty performance sensitive. Now, materials and textures have a little bit more nuance than just discrete choices. Our texture creation is also data-driven. The images and the assets come from something that we call texture synthesis. And some choices are currently discrete. That's a very small amount of choices that are discrete. But even those, like wrinkle maps and blemishes, actually come from our scan data. And when we generate the textures that you get, the maps that you get, they respond to the other parameters. So they do change based on other things that you set. But other parameters like the iris or the skin color actually originate from data and measurements, and they are in a continuum, and they are based on a statistical approach. So this isn't a plain color that is hooked there in the shader. Now, at export time, texture synthesis does all of the prepping, asset generation, does so at multiple resolutions. It's all the things that you would expect. It's very solid. All of the linking is done before the assets are packaged. And once they come into your project, which is what we were talking about before, they are straightforward to understand. They come in as normal textures attached to normal materials. So you can modify it if and as you need it. There are maps for quite a few channels, and this is the bit where they are a little bit more than just simple groom binding assets. Linkage can be more involved. Some of the maps, like the wrinkles, are actually connected to animation channels so that you have the right triggering when your character expresses something. Now, head meshes, and with that we mean static and skeletal meshes here. This is where things start becoming pretty special. Like all of our parts, you do get battle-tested topology, you get consistent assets, fine-grained LODs for everything. But authoring is entirely in a continuous space, and things open up here quite a bit. UX, this is creator, and UX is very playful and intuitive. And we feel that this is where that notion of having a continuous, seamless space of human features actually starts shining through. And it enables like very unique manipulation tools. This isn't just linearly or bilinearly interpolating between a bunch of meshes. This is literally exploring our database. You can start from 1 to 3 presets and blend into that space quickly, and that will get you a good starting point. It gets you the first course approximation of what you might want. You can then move on to details, and these are more localized controls. Now, this bit has a very plastic, proportional modeling kind of feel, but again, in actuality, what you're doing here is exploring our database, and these manipulators like fundamentally move you into this n-dimensional space of human features. So if you've ever used it, most of the time it feels great. Some other times it feels like it's quite not getting there exactly where you want it. As we expand our database, that will start zeroing in more and more and more towards exactly where you place something. Okay, so by design, this process in Metahuman Creator is meant to be in a bound space. Every possible result from it is well behaved and plausible. Now, what's worth noting here is that skinning, joint shapes, displacement shapes, they don't come from discrete presets. If they did, you would have some overly safe and boring deformation. Each head in our database comes with highly polished rigs. So when you generate a metahuman, the rigs and the shapes that go with it are also generated appropriate. Those are turned into frames, track the frames, feed our topology to that mesh, and then you can send that to our backend, which will do all of the rigging and everything. From there, you can choose to edit it further in Creator, or it will just appear in Quixel Bridge, and you can pick it up from there, which is why we're saying, in many ways, this is a new point of entry for Metahuman, and it makes Creator, which remains like incredibly important, optional to your workflow if you decide that you don't want to access it. It's worth noting that when I say things like you need the frame, but we recover from those things. You don't need to split takes, right? Having good lighting is nice, but this is entirely independent from what is happening in the background. You have bright lights, you have movement, it doesn't matter. It's perfectly resilient to all of that. Now, sorry for that. The quality of animation. When we say quality, we don't mean it in some vague sense. We don't even refer to issues like noise. We're particularly well behaved there too. But what we mean is that the function curves that come out of these systems are very well behaved. Semantic space solvers can sometimes choose to interpret different poses that are temporally adjacent with different controls. And when that happens, you'll see curves crisscrossing.
It's around 315,000 verts, so it's fairly high res. Joint count is pretty lightweight. We have 91 bones, and this does include. This was the muscle, flesh, and claw simulation generated in Houdini. But really, there are a ton of different deformations that you might want to learn, depending on your technical and creative goals. So the basic goal is to learn the delta, or the difference, between the complex and simple example across a range of poses. But the muscle, flesh, and claw simulation in Houdini are dynamic in nature. Muscles are affected by gravity,